We are back on the Hawk Zone rundown. Day one of camp started today, and Mike Mack had his first press conference with the media too. But we have Bill and Keith coming on the show to join us from the Seahawks Playbook Podcast, and we're going to get into all that stuff with them. Some Conor Williams talk, Abe Lucas. What do they think his timeline is based on what Mike MacDonald's been saying and just what's been said in the media and to the media this whole last long time when Abe's dealing with these injuries. So we're gonna get the guys' thoughts on that, and then in the latter half of the show, we're gonna put together our 53-man roster and what that might look like, and then kind of say how close are we gonna be to the actual 53-man when it's all said and done. So we're gonna have some fun with that, have some debates. With some of the players, obviously, when we get that fired up. So, Bryce, what's going on, man? I bet you're pumped up. You've been waiting for this day. Day one's here.
Day one is here. Christmas has finally arrived, man. And, listen to the Mike Mack interview and just either other people that were there, reporters and stuff. The one thing that one kind of quote stood out to me, and it really hit home for me. Someone said it was like when Coach Boone took over in Remember the Titans, the attention to detail. And they said that's one thing that stuck out so much at training camp today was how much of an attention to detail type of coaching staff, not just MacDonald, but the entire staff is, which is different than the Pete Carroll regime. So it'll be interesting to talk to Keith and Bill about that coming up. So yeah, man, I'm ready to go.
Absolutely, guys. Before we get into all that stuff, really quick, if you like what we've been watching and you haven't subbed yet to the channel, go down and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and make sure you hit that bell too, so you're not going to miss any future episodes coming up. And everybody that's been supporting the channel, we can't thank you enough for the continued support. So coming up on the other side, we got Bill and Keith from the Seahawks Playbook Podcast.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game.
For this run. What a run. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a lead. Leon Washington. Jackson Smith and Jigba. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does.
Is it going to be another 9-8?
Mike MacDonald got to finish something.
They have to fix the offense.
Part of his success and part of
ambition of being the LOB one again. That's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the Hawk Zone rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
With us tonight is returning guest from the Seahawks Playbook Podcast, Bill Alvstad, back on the show. Day one of camp, Bill. We appreciate you coming on, joining us, and talking Seahawks again.
Hey, man, it's exciting. We're actually talking about things we're seeing on the field. We're hearing writers are able to be there in person, and the enthusiasm is all ramped up. Obviously, we got a new era of Seahawks football. Pete Carroll's gone. Mike MacDonald's in. New regime, new players, rookies coming in. All of the guys are finally together, rookies and veterans. What's not to be excited about? I mean, Mike MacDonald in his press conference was just talking in superlatives about the whole thing, including the scenery and just setting the stage for just how fun it is to be back. And I have to agree, man. I'm super pumped. And thanks for having me on, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
I appreciate it. We may get Keith
coming
on the show if he plugs in. We're not sure at this point if he is, but if he's here, that'll be great too.
It will be. But yeah, so why don't we talk about the first day of camp? Like you said, so much to talk about in the off season leading up to this. And already, a few things to talk about. Obviously, Mike MacDonald had his press conference today. One of the things that stuck out for me was, again, the Abe Lucas discussion. Guys were asking, how is it coming along with Abe? And I think somebody asked, I think it might have even been Greg Bell, is he going to play week one? I feel like at this point, it's just not what you want to hear. It's always so generic. Abe's working hard. He's coming along. They're just not giving much away. And sometimes when you hear that gets worrisome to you. What are your thoughts hearing, the latest on Abe? What have you heard? The latest, and what's your prediction as far as a timeline for him?
Yeah. I guess I'll go back to what Pete Carroll used to do. Pete Carroll used to do the song and dance and speak in Pete Carrollisms about injuries and so forth. And anytime Pete would say something like it's the real deal, or it's serious or whatever, it usually was. And he didn't say that very often. And now Mike MacDonald, I've got to kind of figure him out, like what he says, what he doesn't say, but he seemed pretty non-committal, I guess is the word I would use. And as far as this time frame on return, he did say he's working hard, all those things you mentioned. He did say, however, that he hoped there would be more progress by now, quote unquote. That's the part that I think gives me some pause. And then he also said they can't put a time frame on his return. Now, I've heard from other sources that say he looks strong. He's walking without a limp. He's running full speed, straight line. But that's not the agility stuff that you're looking for on those linemen. And your guess is probably as good as mine. I'd say those indicators tell you that he's probably going to start the year on IR, and we're looking for a mid-season kind of return. My hopeful side says, they're doing all the right things. They're not pushing him right now. This is a smart move, kind of acclimate him to training camp, get him involved in walking through drills first, and kind of bump him up so that by game one, he's ready to go. Game one's 5 weeks away? So there's not a lot of time to ramp him up. The hope, I think, and probably for him too, MacDonald and Lucas, was that he'd be ready now so that he could kind of go and start full speed. And we're just not there. We signed George Fant for a reason. You were talking about that before we pushed record. And I'm thankful that we did. But George Fant's kind of he's a starter level guy, but he's, bottom third of the league starter level. I'm glad we have him for depth, and it looks like we might need him. I know that McClendon Curtis, the player that was in minicamp that took all the starter reps at right guard, they've now moved him over to right tackle for the first practice sessions. So, and Mike MacDonald spoke about that as well. Just having him ready, being able to play multiple positions and stuff, it was a good thing for him as well. So I'm interested to kind of hear your perspective, both Bryce and Ryan, because I just feel like there's just very little information to go on, and we're just speculating.
So I'm just looking at what Brady Henderson reported today on kind of exactly what Mike MacDonald said about Abe Lucas, Bill. And one of the things he goes, we're in the process of bringing him back. We have a plan for him, but we can't tell you right now when he'll exactly be back. When those things start to become more clear, we'll let you know for sure. We're not trying to pull a fast one. That, to me, when he says we're in the process of bringing him back, but it's not clear, that to me either says that there might have been a setback at some point in this recovery for Abe Lucas that maybe they think wasn't going to be as big as it is. But like how he also says, I think it would be fair to say that we were hoping it would go a little faster up to this point. Those like kind of two quotes in there from Mike MacDonald make me think if he's not prepared to play the third preseason game, that there's a good chance he starts on IR for the first 4 weeks of the season, and that they can pull him off. And then the fact that McClendon Curtis has now moved from right guard over to right tackle, even though they just let Terrell Aikman go this morning, I guess, or yesterday, and now you've moved Curtis over to right tackle. Brady says the same thing. He says, seems like this is a sign that it'll be a while before Lucas is back. Which, again, like the optimistic side of me is hopefully he's there for game one. The more logical side of my brain now is going the same as you, Bill, is like is he going to be on the IR for the first 4 weeks of the season?
Yeah. And you know what? Here's my thinking. Listen, this is Abe Lucas's career. This is his opportunity to be his best self and get right. The last thing I would want to do is push him out there game one if he's not 100%. And I'd rather have him start on IR. And it's 4 games, yeah, and maybe a couple weeks to bring him back before he needs to be on the active roster. So you're talking about missing 6 weeks of the season, but then maybe you get the remaining 11 games out of him, maybe playoffs. So that's, to me, more important. So I try to have that long view perspective on this. But yeah, I mean, the best starting lineup includes him in it. I mean, there's just no question. When he's there and he's full strength and he's playing well, he's the best lineman on the team.
Yeah. Agreed. My opinion real quick is that it goes back to, is it a chronic thing, long term? Like, I mean, we know Pete used that word and we all freaked out when he said that, but then he came back and then he got hurt again, and he came then he came back last year. Now he's out, and that just gets you worried. To me, it's more, okay, if he misses 4 or 5 and you slowly get him back in, but is he going to get hurt again? And I think that's what most Seahawks fans are sort of thinking about. Like, is this just going to be a thing where we're going to have to start looking for a new tackle? Again, I don't want to get too far ahead because right now we still have Abe, and I don't want to look at the worst case scenario, but it's sometimes that could be a thing, and he has had injury issues history wise. So it's one of those things. The one positive though is, like you said, with him in the lineup, it's your best lineup, but we do have more depth this year, which all being some young guys and some veterans, a mix of guys that I feel better going in this year, and with Scott Huff as well, with Abe maybe sitting on the sidelines and slowly getting them in, where we can still stay above water and still compete and win some football games here. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with that.
Agreed.
But you know what? But staying with the line, Conor Williams was in the building. He had a physical with the Seahawks and passed his physical. Man, he would be a big time player here.
Yeah.
Hasn't signed yet. We're all hoping we get it done here. Awesome run blocking and also just as effective in the pass protection last season. Bill, what are your thoughts if we grab this guy? We just talked about Abe Lucas. Here's a guy that played center last year. Like you said, they're playing around with some moving parts with some of the guys on that line. What's your overall thoughts there with Conor Williams?
I like Conor Williams. I mean, this is his second ACL. He returned faster than predicted on both of them. So in his first one, I think he was 9 months, and then this one, he's going to be eight plus months, and past his physical, he's ready to go in camp. He just isn't like, well, he's probably going to be ready game one. He's ready to go right now. Came in, had a great meeting. Understand from Schefter that they're negotiating a deal. And it doesn't say that it's imminent, and it does say that he's negotiating, looking at other teams as well. But anytime you're hearing negotiations, they're probably, if they want him, and I expect that they do, they won't let him leave, and they'll get it done. They'll figure it out. Maybe the Julian Love, you probably talk about Julian Love, one of your next questions, redid a deal, did an extension, gave him maybe a little bit of cap money to play around with there to get a deal done with Conor Williams. So I like it. Now, if you're Oluwatimi, you're probably going, wow, this kind of sucks. I was penciled in, and here I am. If this guy comes in, all of a sudden I'm no longer starting, and that's a bad thing for him. But again, that shows the lack of confidence that this regime had in our options at center. We had Oluwatimi and Nick Harris. They picked up. Nick Harris wasn't going to be the starter guy. He just isn't. And it looked like Oluwatimi. And this can happen in the NFL. Guy comes in, you have an opportunity to upgrade your roster, especially when you're looking at right tackle being an issue. You want to get as good as you can with the remaining guys, and that's what this is.
Yeah, when I looked at the Conor Williams news and kind of saw that, hey, he was coming into Seattle and he was going to take a physical and do the thing that screamed to me was, and it goes back to when Seattle drafted Olu, not last year, but the year before, was how John Schneider talked about Olu, which was he's really stout, really smart. He's all these things. But then when you look at what Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb do with their O-line, I kind of started to get a little worried with Olu because of the fact you didn't hear quick, agile, or any of those terms kind of used with him coming out of Michigan. And that's where, when you look at a guy like Conor Williams, that's kind of part of his game. He's a very agile center. He can move, even though he's got the knee injuries that he's had. And so when I think about it in that regard, I'm going, okay, clearly what they've seen through minicamp is they're not sold Olu can do a lot of what maybe their assignments or their scheme is asking for. We need to bring in someone that can. And that's where I look at Conor Williams, because if you get Conor Williams, he was an all-pro center. And now you've actually got a legitimate center that has experience, that's played at a top 5 level for a good chunk of his career.
Under 30 years old, correct? I think
he's under 30. So you could,
yeah.
if he plays well, you extend him, and now Seattle's potentially maybe found their solution at center, and Olu turns into your backup.
I think. I'm certainly concerned about the ACLs, no question, right? That's going to have an impact, especially as he gets into his 30s.
Yeah.
But I'll take 3 years of Conor Williams. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm thinking. I think when you look at this situation, when you have a guy like Conor available, you bring him in, and like we all know, it's been a revolving door at that center position for about the last 10 seasons, after Max Unger left. So I think if you're the Seahawks, you might even take that into account. Like maybe, sure, like Bryce, you bring up the good points about how Scott Huff likes to use his O-line, but then also you look at it like, this guy's Olu's an unproven center in the NFL. So do we say we're going to just give it another shot for another year, and if it works out, or hey, this guy's available, a proven veteran who, like you said, top 5 guy, to me, it's a no-brainer to get him in. Like you said,
Ryan,
3 years. You got 3 years of this guy.
What kind of a contract do you think that he would get? Would it be a prove it deal? Like it's late. It's late in free agency. He's coming in. He doesn't have a lot of leverage, but you could argue that we don't either. And so where does that contract fall?
I could see the type of contract I could see kind of getting worked out here is a 1-year deal, obviously, to start, with playtime incentives that now punch this up into, if you hit this goal and you stay healthy, you get paid in the middle to lower part of that tier of centers in the league, not at the bottom where you're basically like a journeyman, but where there's enough of an incentive to be like, yeah, if I hit all my goals and I get healthy and I can go into next season's free agency, I'm going to get another payday, because like we've discussed, he's under the age of 30. He'll still be only 28 going into the free agency next year, 29. He's still under that. And that's kind of how I think it works out. And that's why the Julian Love contract extension is kind of interesting, because they also both share the same agent in Drew Rosenhaus. So I got to wonder if Seattle moves some of that money so that they could incentively give Conor Williams certain benchmarks to hit, and they'd actually have the money to deliver on those throughout the year if he hits those incentives.
Yeah, and some of those don't need to be paid out until next year, because some of those would be unlikely to hit, I would imagine. Now, I agree with you. There's probably some incentives and whatnot. You could essentially sign a $3.5 million deal with incentives to get to 7 or 8, with the 3.5 fully guaranteed, something like that. Where it's,
I'm just looking at the over the cap right now, guys, and like, for example, the highest paid center this year is going to be Frank Ragnow with the Lions. So looking at him, he's averaging 13. Nick Harris, who we just signed for in free agency, is kind of in the middle of that pack there, and he's getting 2.3. So when I look at some of the, like, a mark for me would probably actually be an old Seahawks center, which is Ethan Posick. He's getting 6, million this year from the Browns. So I could say Seattle does something like that. And then again, if Conor Williams hits his mark, maybe he ends up being in the like David Andrews to Andre James of the Raiders, kind of that 8 to 6.5 million 1 year deal with the incentive. That's what, for me, I think that's your kind of benchmark, because you're not going to have him come in and make less than Nick Harris. And looking at some of the other the other guys on here, like the 49ers, Jake Brendel, he's 4.1. Garrett Bradbury with the Vikings is 5.2. I think Conor Williams, when he plays, is better than both of them. Like we said, he's healthy and playing. He's one of the top centers in football. Push him up into that upper half of that echelon there, and I think you're going to get yourself a deal. And it doesn't hurt you that much because, like you said, Bill, the incentives don't get paid until next year.
Right. And I wouldn't do longer than a 1 year deal, probably, based on his medicals. And he's going to want to hit free agency at the top of his market at the right time. So he wants to hit free agency in March. He's coming in now. It's almost August. You do a 1 year deal. You give him an opportunity to show out. He probably will. He'll probably earn some money in March. That's a great deal for both parties.
Yeah. Do you think it might be coming down to maybe he wants that second year? Based right, but just based on, say, some of the, like we just talked about, if when he's healthy, he's a good center in this league, right? So I'm just looking at that, like, we're in
the thing where it makes sense. The thing where it makes sense to do something like that is if you're it cap strapped, and we've got about $8 million before the Julian Love deal. And we know we can probably figure that saved, $2-3 million in cap space this year, maybe. So we were up to 11 something, maybe. I think that if you construct it a certain way, you can have, a smaller cap hit this year and then push it out, and then have some sort of a get out of jail, clause in there where you can get out injury wise and pay him off if you needed to. But you could also take advantage of a cheaper deal right now if you're Seattle. Conor Williams likely makes more money next year. If you can lock him in now, maybe there is an incentive to do a 2 year deal.
So just so we have some context, last year with the Dolphins, he made his base salary was 6.5. He had a prorated bonus of 1.3. So his total cap hit last year was 8.3 million. So it wasn't like he was way up there making a bunch of money.
How many years did he have prior to that, though? That was a 3 year deal.
So he was only on a 2 year. He's only been with the Dolphins for 2 years. So he was drafted by the Cowboys. His initial rookie deal was a 4 year deal, 6.6. And then he signed in the offseason of 2021, going into 2022 with the Dolphins. And his deal was a 2 year, $13 million deal. Or basically 13.8, so we'll say $14 million deal with the Dolphins.
Yeah. So those are numbers that we're talking about. I mean, we've been talking about. Yeah, I think that.
So he's in that ballpark where he's not the top and he's not the bottom. So if you put him in that middle, and maybe you do like what you said, Bill, and you do give him a 2 year deal. And we know John Schneider's done it in the past, and the new cap guy seems to kind of do it a little bit more now, it seems, the contract. You can always throw those void years into it too if you're not
You push the money out, you take the cap hit next year because the cap's going to go up.
Exactly. And you just keep doing that all the way along.
You don't want to do that too much.
No, you don't want to turn into the
sense in this situation where you're really adding value to your line in a situation where your line is the worst unit on your team.
Yeah, this isn't like we're signing what was it, Luke Jokel a couple years back where we weren't sure what we were going to get.
And it seems like we're in win now mode. I mean, and they're not just kind of playing this along. They're not like trying to get to next year or whatever. Yeah, you can argue Geno Smith's a bridge. You can argue some of the other position groups are weak and so forth. I think that's just kind of a cap space situation, limited draft capital, et cetera. Obviously we're in probably a 2 year, at least a 2 year rebuild in order to give Mike MacDonald his roster. Just the roster churn is the thing. So I think, having that extra time would benefit both parties for sure. So what I would expect is probably a 1 year deal, like a 1 year deal, because Conor Williams has incentive to want to hit free agency next March.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you said, Bill, if they see the value in there and they do seem like they're in that win now mode, like you said, doesn't mean they're gonna win right now, but they want to compete, and Mike wants to compete. So have this guy that, your mainstay on that offensive line, a veteran presence. And I think that might where it just comes down with Olu is just he's unproven. And this guy comes in and, okay, now you got crossover here, you got Tomlinson, another vet. You sort of have a nice mix now, and not just young guys across the board. And it's to me, if you can kind of get a little more confident with that.
Man, if you can get Conor Williams and then Abe Lucas comes back, you've all of a sudden got what is perceived to be a weakness today, ends up being a nice strength for you, especially if everyone can stay healthy.
Yeah, and then with Scott Huff, obviously we're not too sure, but a lot of guys are speaking highly of him. So, with that combination, it could be good. But, speaking about rosters and weak and strong parts of it, we're going to take a quick break. But on the other side, we're going to throw together our own 53-man roster and have some fun with that. Sort of like a mock draft, but with the roster. And, we'll get into that after the short break here. Hey guys, welcome back. We are set to go building our 53-man Seattle Seahawk roster. And Bryce, looks like we got quarterbacks up on the board first. When do you kick it off? And we'll get right into it here.
Yeah, so we're going to use from the German Seahawkers page. They built this cool simulator. Mitch and Josh from 12 Talk Podcast kind of turned me onto it and sent me the link for it to give it a try. So makes it a little bit easier than spreadsheets and that. So they've actually built this in. So we're going to go off of this. So we'll start with the quarterback position. I think we're all pretty unanimous that it's going to be Geno and Sam Howell that'll be the two quarterbacks. I think there's a chance that PJ Walker potentially makes it on the practice squad. But I don't see him making the 53-man roster. I just don't see them wasting a third quarterback spot on PJ Walker.
Yeah, certainly it's either PJ Walker or it's another quarterback that we don't know about yet. Yeah, there will be a quarterback on the practice squad. But yeah, Geno, Sam Howell.
Yeah, we're in agreement there.
Okay, so we'll go over to receiver. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. We know the three guys that are mainly going to make it, so I'll put them right in, DK, Tyler, and JSN. Now, Seattle in the past with Pete carried 6 or 5 guys. There was the one year I think they carried 7. I don't know if I see 6 receivers that I would keep on this roster. The reason I say that, and this is where I kind of wanted to throw a bit of a curveball to both Ryan and Bill here, is I wonder if they don't keep Jack Westover as like an H back instead of carrying, say, like a Derek Young or a Winston Jr. Like, I think Bobo may make this team, and I think Chenault will make this team. But if I was in Mike MacDonald's shoes, Jack Westover's that carryover of Ryan Grubb from what he used to do at Washington to what he's going to try and do in Seattle. And he's not built like any of our other tight ends. And he kind of gives you some positional versatility and special teams value, I think, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously the first 3 guys, right? You're gonna pick, and I agree. I think Bobo makes the team. Tariq Young, like another big receiver, been around for what, couple seasons now. Like I know Bryce, you talked about Hayden Haddon, and you like his game, but similar to what we kind of got. So yeah, the Westover point can make a lot of sense too, because he is that carryover, undrafted free agent, but say they obviously like the guy. Yeah, it could come down to that. I mean, I think yeah, maybe you carry the 5 that you mentioned, that because I don't know. I don't see D. Eskridge. Bill, what do you think?
It does kind of tie into what you're going to do at running back and tight end for sure. You can keep your 3 tight ends. You can go with 6 wide receivers, 4 running backs, and I think that's your position group stuff, your talent groups. That's kind of the way that I played it. But I can see the argument for Westover, absolutely. I can see the argument for keeping Derek Young. Now, Derek's been injured both years that he's kind of been out, and just really hasn't gotten that shot yet. And they kind of drew up you could almost see it in preseason last year. They kind of drew up game plans, kind of revolved around him on some stuff out of the backfield and some swing passes and so forth, and let him create an open space. And that just didn't happen. They drafted AJ Barner. I think that Farrell Brown, I don't think is going anywhere because they need his veteran kind of experience inline blocking. I think my wide receivers are Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jake Bobo, Laviska Shenault, and Derek Young.
All right, so I'll put Jake Bobo, Laviska Shenault, and so we think Derek Young in over Westover. Is that what the consensus kind of is? Is we're going to carry him? Okay.
I mean, yeah,
I see your point though on Westover being like an H-back kind of a guy and a fullback and being in, if you've got two tight ends in line to block. But you can also carry that. You can also have him on the shadow roster, like
and that's the thing. I wonder. I think honestly, this conversation will, I think, really come down to who plays better in the preseason. Does Derek Young finally kind of take off a little bit, and Westover doesn't really fit, or does Westover truly show his versatility and his value, and Derek Young continues kind of down the path he's been? So right now we'll play it as 6 receivers. We'll move to the running back spot. So we know Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are in there. Now, this is where I kind of get interested. And there's some guys like Conor Williams isn't on the roster anymore. So we'll use, I can't remember the guy that they just signed out of the UFL.
Ricky Pearson Jr.
Yeah, Ricky Pearson. We'll use Conor Williams, and his spot will basically be Ricky Pearson. Kenny McIntosh is interesting to me here because we didn't get to really see him last year. But when you listen to John Schneider's press conference at the draft, he was over the moon that he was able to get an SEC starting caliber running back in the 7th round. And I think McIntosh brings a little bit of a difference than Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. He's kind of like a hybrid of both of them. He can catch out of the backfield, but he can also run between the tackles, and he has some getaway speed. But George Halani is another interesting guy, I think, from that they picked up in UDFA this year.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a heightened interest at the running back position come cut time this year because of the receiving out of the backfield options that you mentioned, Bryce. Last year, I think, and this is off memory, I think we had close to 70 receptions combined for running backs out of the backfield. I could easily see that bump up to about 90 this year. And the screen game and so forth that we haven't had in Seattle for over a decade. And so that's why I think Kenny McIntosh makes the roster for sure. And then I definitely think they carry 4. And I think Ricky Pearson's the 4th guy currently. Now, George Halani, from what I understand, showed up and looked tremendous first day at camp, just as far as just a body. He's got a lower half that really gives you confidence that he can pretty much do whatever he wants to do on the field. And he's got some of that experience receiving out of the backfield. Kobe Lewis is another name. Not too familiar with Kobe, but he is on the 90-man right now. But those guys are all practice squad candidates.
Yeah. No, I'll echo that. I think George Halani's on there too. But yeah, Kenny Mack, to me, like you said, you bump that up to maybe 90. He just seems like he was such a versatile back in college, and like Bryce said, Schneider was over the moon, talking about him. So we just didn't get to see him. He had some injuries, and then almost forgotten about. So I'm actually excited, and I want to see some Kenny Mack during this preseason for sure.
I want to see an effective run game. I mean,
well, that too. Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, we had the same. We're running back the same thing we had last year. It's going to come down to scheme and a couple of players tweaked. We're adding Lake and Tomlinson at guard, and other than that, though, we're kind of running back the same thing.
Well, Bill,
we'll see what happens.
and Bryce and I have talked about that. We said, we were sitting here last year at this time saying, look, we drafted JSN, pick your poison here. DK Metcalf, Tyler, our backs.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just like, game in, game out. You felt like, what's the identity of this team? Like you said, one week they want to run the ball, and then it's just, and then we joke about how, Shane Waldron now got an OC job, and he's got kind of the college version of DK, and obviously now he's picked 9th overall for the Bears, and you got Shane as your OC, and so now you got Ryan Grubb coming in here, and you like you said, you have essentially the same firepower minus a couple offensive linemen, but you just feel like a sense of excitement because of Grubb's history and creativity and moving guys around like a DK. Now where's he going to be on the field, not just lined up on the left side, right? So that's sort of you, like you said, you kind of forget you're bringing back the same guys because you feel like it's just going to be potentially a totally different looking offense.
Agreed.
It's really funny because I was listening to a bunch of the different interviews today and going through. Obviously, he didn't look like a first-time play caller. Oh, am I here? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
You good? Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Technical difficulty. But no, the one thing I said about Ryan Grubb today is he didn't look like a guy that this was his first rodeo out there. Like he looked like a seasoned offensive coordinator in the NFL game even. Things were efficient. They were very detail-oriented. So that's a good thing to kind of hear. Jack Westover actually did an interview on KJR, and they kind of asked him about DK, like, oh, what do you think Grubb's going to do with DK? Because it's like Rome Odunze. And the first thing Jack Westover says, like, I understand the comparison, but he goes, DK Metcalf is completely different than Rome Odunze. And he goes, the way that I think and have seen what Coach Grubb's got planned for him, I don't think people are going to expect what they're expecting because he's going to be all over the place. He's not going to be in the same spot every single time. So those were kind of some positive things to hear. Yeah, that's kind of some positive things to hear. And actually, it's interesting with George Halani, how we were talking about how he came into camp in such great shape. I can't remember who I saw, but somebody said it reminded them of another Boise State running back from a few years back. Doug Martin is the comp that I kind of like not a poor man's Doug Martin, but a similar kind of build and explosiveness to him. So I think that could be interesting, but I agree. So we're going to we'll put George Halani in right now as the 4th running back, but we all kind of agree. We think it'll be him or Ricky Pearson, who's not listed up here, that ends up being that kind of 4th running back of the team. We'll move over to tight end. So Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown, and AJ Barner is what we all agreed on because we already discussed the Derek Young, Jack Westover kind of back and forth there. I don't think Brady Wilson makes this team, and I don't think Tyler Mayberry makes it. Like, I feel like Tyler Mayberry is always on the Seahawks and never makes the roster. And
Brady Russell had, I don't know how many, like a couple hundred special team snaps last year. So it's not like he's just a body. He's a guy that really did contribute, but you got a new regime. You've got a different roster makeup. He would definitely be outside looking in on my roster.
So we're up to 15 guys on offense here. So let's go to our O-line. So I'm going to pick off the guys we already know that are going to be on this roster, either contract-wise or whatnot. So we know it's Charles Cross, Abe Lucas when he gets healthy, Laken Tomlinson, Christian Haynes. What else do we got? Lamea, George Fant, Anthony Bradford took first reps, Olu. Now, this is where it gets interesting because we were talking about Conor Williams, and obviously, there's McClendon Curtis, there's Terrain Akram, who's no longer part of this roster. I don't know if Stone Forsythe makes this roster.
Right.
Because he's in a contract year. Do you risk putting a guy like a Greenfeld or a Mike Jarrell on and try and sneak them through when I know Greenfeld got a lot of money guaranteed to him? I think one of the highest UDFAs in that regard. And you spent the draft pick on Michael Jarrell. I could see a situation where they try and get those guys on the 53 because they're worried they're going to lose either one of them trying to sneak them through to the practice roster. I just don't know what your thoughts are on that, Bill and Ryan.
Well, I'm in disagreement with you in a little bit in that I think that Seteo Luma doesn't make the roster initially, and I think that he starts the year on the practice squad, and that's a tough one for me. And the only reason that in a normal year I think he makes it, but you've got Anthony Bradford, McClendon Curtis is going to make this team from all accounts that I'm hearing about. Laken Tomlinson, Christian Haynes, those are locks to me. That's it. There's no other room. And then you've got to have your tackles. So you've got to have Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, George Fant. Now, Abe Lucas goes on IR, you've got a little bit of flexibility. But ideally, he's on the roster. And then Raekwon O'Neal, to me, Stone Forsythe didn't show anything last year in significant playing time that told me that he was ready for the NFL at all. So I would go with Raekwon O'Neal. I've heard good things about him. Very consistent player, shows up all the time, good practice player, et cetera. They like him. Max Pritchard has got less upside for me. Michael Jarrell, obviously we drafted him for a reason. He's just not ready. He's not ready to be on a roster, and so he's got to go to the practice squad. Garrett Grainfield, same thing. And Jalen Sundell is another name who I believe they just signed. And so for me, it's Christian Haynes, Anthony Bradford, McClendon Curtis, Laken Tomlinson, offensive guard, Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, George Fant, Raekwon O'Neal at tackle, and that's what? 8.
We're at 8 right now currently.
And then I've got two centers coming.
Right. So are we saying Nick Harris makes this, or do we think they signed Conor Williams before preseason, I guess, would be the question?
Well, I mean, I made up my roster before Conor Williams, discussion got serious. But so I had Oluwatimi and Nick Harris on my roster, but obviously it would change to Conor Williams, Oluwatimi.
And Olu.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was just gonna say I'm in line with that too. Obviously, Nick Harris would be the odd man out for me too. It's tough with Lamea.
And
Bill, you bring up some good. Yeah, I was just gonna say you bring up some good points because you look. That's why when I said earlier in the show about you feel a little better if Abe has to start the year on the IR because. You have some depth, you have some veterans mixed in with
then
some
you've
young
got room
guys.
for either Jarrell or Lumea to make this roster too.
Right. Yeah. So it's you start looking at those names, you're like, okay, there's some like you said, some hard decisions, and Lamea maybe not ready to, in a year like this. Last season probably makes the roster no problem.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit and throw a little context in with Lamea and why I think he makes this roster. If you watch the Seahawk call things that they do where they talk to the players, I think he was Scott's Huff, like bang the table, give me this guy, because of Scott Huff trying so hard to recruit him to Washington, and he missed out at that point. The other reason I say that is you just let go of Terrell Ankrum. Sorry, Ankrum. I keep calling him Ankrum. Seteo has basically been working at left guard behind Laken Tomlinson, and I think their plan is he starts there, not this year, but next year after Tomlinson's gone. I think there's a higher chance that they carry 3 running backs and put George or Ricky Pierce in the practice squad and keep Lamea, because if they try and put Lamea through, I think he's gone, and I think some team steals him because of, you listen to a lot of draft experts, even scouts, and that when Seattle took him and Haynes, and they said they got Lamea way later than he should have gone. He should have been a guy that went earlier. That's why I think Lamea makes the roster, and maybe we drop George Halani off this and keep Lamea and add Nick Harris to it. I'm in agreement with you. Probably can sneak Mike Jarrell through because he's a Div 2 guy. Greenfield, I think you can sneak through. And I think you're right. Stone Forsythe hasn't shown anything in his now going into year 4 where you can go, yeah, he can be our swing tackle because they wouldn't have signed George Fant if they believed that to begin with. They would have just kept Stone Forsythe, and George Fant wouldn't come back to Seattle. So are we in agreement on that maneuver?
I mean, those are valid points. Like everything that you said makes complete and total sense. It's either George Holani, Ricky Person, those guys get dropped off, they go with 3, or they drop the 6th wide receiver and they go with 5 initially, or they only carry 2 tight ends, whatever maneuvering they need to do, or they feel comfortable enough only carrying 3 tackles on the roster and having a couple guys come off the practice squad and be activated, week in, week out. There's some things you can do to kind of and maneuver, but it all gets solved if you got Abe Lucas, But if Abe Lucas is off, then you've got some nice decisions to make with a couple of back end roster guys that make it kind of interesting.
Okay, so we'll go. So far, just so we're all clear, we've got Abe Lucas, Charles Cross, Lincoln Tomlinson, Christian Haynes, Lamea, George Fant, Anthony Bradford, Oluwatimi, Nick Harris, and then you figured Raekwon O'Neal would make this roster, correct, Bill?
Only because I thought that they would want to carry 4 tackles.
But with George, that's the one thing I wonder with George Fant's flexibility if they go with the one, and because McClendon Curtis, where we should put him on here because I think I agree, he is making this. He now, I think, potentially becomes that other swing tackle, right? Like he can step in and play guard, except for center. So that's where I think you get that. So we ended up with 25, even keeping the 4th running back. We keep Lamea on here, and then you look at the guys that are gone. We figure Jarrell and Greenfield make our practice squad. Maybe we're cutting Raekwon O'Neal, and then the rest of them, Ankram's already gone. I don't think Pritchard's making it, or Nowitzki and Stone Forsythe, I think. They might be able to trade Stone Forsythe potentially for a late round pick. Maybe like here's a team comes and says, hey, we've had an injury. We need a backup tackle or a potential guy that can start a game or 2. Here's a 7th round pick. Kind of like what John Schneider's been famous for doing sometimes late is, the guy's going to get cut and you don't want him to go. That's what I'm kind of thinking. So how do we feel about this Seahawk offense right now? I actually like this. Give me Conor Williams over Nick Harris, and I like it a lot more.
Right. And Abe Lucas starts. Yeah.
I like that a lot more in that situation. I think, what was very interesting about what Ryan said was we're having to cut talent on our O-line. When is the last time we've been able to actually say like, oh, this is really tough. Do we keep him? Do we keep him? And like have this honest conversation on our talent at the O-line position and young talent. Like when I look at that list, Laken Tomlinson's the only one I go, yeah, okay, maybe he's a 1-year guy. All these other guys I look at and I go, these are all young guys that are under 5 years in the league, except for maybe George Fant too, who's an older player.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in a certain sense, but at the same time, for me, guys like Matt Pritchard, Jarrell, currently Greenfield, Sundahl, Forsythe, O'Neal, those are practice squad level guys that have the potential to get better, but they're not ready right now. Yeah. But I agree with you that, they're young guys. They've got some potential. You could end up seeing a guy like Gerald get picked off, similar to the way Raekwon O'Neal was picked off last year by Seattle. Picked him off the practice squad. He stayed on the roster all year. That can certainly happen too. That would be my fear if Lamea went onto the practice squad. Yeah, I think you're right. A guy, same that happened to McClendon Curtis. We picked him off of the Raiders practice squad, stayed on the roster all year. So you got to be careful. If you're really interested in a guy, you got to figure out a way to keep him.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, let's move over to the defense. Have some fun over there.
All right. So we're starting with linebackers. So in this program, linebackers include edge linebackers. So like Chenna's on there, Darrell Taylor, Derek Hall. So at linebacker, Chenna's making this roster. Obviously, Baker and Dodson, now that they're healthy and cleared, I think are 2 guys that are obviously going to make this roster. Boy Mafe is another one. Tyrese Knight, do we think he may? I think he does. Yeah. I think he actually might play more and be more impactful than people think. I think he's
agreed.
So we're at 5. Now, Derek Hall, apparently he came into shape built differently from what I've heard on the first day. He actually took Greenfeld today and basically pancaked him on a rush. And Greenfeld's not small. He's 6'7", 320. Derek Hall apparently looks like he's even better shape than he was last year when everyone was kind of ogling over him. Mm-hmm. I think he actually has not necessarily a big a jump as Boy Mafe made as a pass rusher, but I think Derek Hall is a better edge setter for that outside of that defense in the run game, which I think will help maybe give Chenna some breaks so he's not on the field all the time. And honestly, I think Derek Hall is a better prospect than Darrell Taylor is at this point.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Hall last year, you watched him, and he was awful in certain spots. He got run over. He was out of position. He was late to get into spots. I think that was all coaching.
Right.
Like, you watched Darrell Hall in college, and he was kind of a playmaker. He was in position. He could set the edge for you because he was strong, has a great lower body half. I see a big jump for him this year. Now, Nwasu, Mafe, Hall, Taylor, when we can talk about Taylor, because that's probably a conversation point. And Dre Jones, I understand, is playing a lot of outside linebacker edge this year, not just at the 3-tech. So Dre Jones is actually going to be sliding around a lot. Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to see who gets the snaps, Dre Jones or Darrell Taylor, Derek Hall.
So I look at this right now. We have 6 linebackers. I think they're going to carry essentially 4 edge and 4 inside. So your 2 inside and then your 2 backups.
Right.
Everyone assumes because John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell took reps in minicamp that they're just penciled in as they're going to be the number 2s behind Dodson and Baker. I think Easton Gibbs is someone that people are kind of forgetting about. And he was also given a good chunk of money as a UDFA and he played a lot of linebacker at Wyoming. I think he makes that over John Radigan. And this is why I say John Radigan. Everyone kind of, when I say that, they all get kind of worried about it. John Radigan got a lot of money as an RFA, which was kind of surprising to me. And I think an Easton Gibbs gives you special teams versatility as well. And I get John Radigan was a special team ace for us. But I think it's between him or Patrick O'Connell at who makes it as that other inside linebacker with Tyrese Knight. And the reason I think it's one of those two is the other reason I think O'Connell has a bit of an edge is I think O'Connell's a better back, like actual linebacker if you had to play him in a pinch in the defense, where I don't think John Radigan really is. And so if John Radigan's main thing is special teams, I'd rather take a guy that I think I can develop as another rookie on a lower deal and free up that cap space. If I need to go and get a proven veteran because Dotson or Baker gets hurt, I have more flexibility than, okay, now I'm stuck with John Radigan who can't really give me anything in the defense. At least that's my point of view on it. And I think Bill is going to give me a run for my money here with his theory.
Well, it depends on how you view linebackers. So last year, yeah, you're right. They played a traditional role. You wanted them a little more size and Pete Carroll's defense and so on and so forth. This time you're looking for a little bit more athleticism. You're looking for a little bit more sideline to sideline. John Radigan can give you that. He had an ACL early in his career. That's fully healed now. And the experience level that a little bit more than Patrick O'Connell, but I get you on Patrick O'Connell and Drake Thomas. To me, those are super athletic upside kind of guys. Now, you talk about Easton Gibbs. He's currently on the, is it the PUP list or non-football?
He's on the NFI list along with, is it just him that's there still? I think it's just him.
Just him as a linebacker, yes. Yeah. And so, and then today, when asked, he wasn't a name that came up. MacDonald said that he expect Cameron Young to be back in a week, but he didn't mention the other guys. So I would just pause a little bit on that. Tyrese Knight, I don't think is even a question. This is Mike MacDonald's pick in the draft, and he wanted this guy for a reason. He's a linebacker guru. That's his player. He's going to be on the roster. Yeah. But other than that, I agree with you. I think 4-4 makes a lot of sense. in the group, edge rusher and inside guys. And I think you've got it right. We can have a conversation though about Darrell Taylor for sure.
Yeah. So are we putting in John Radigan and Easton Gibbs, or Patrick O'Connell and John Radigan?
I don't know how you do that. I would do Dodson, Baker, Radigan, Knight.
Okay, so you want to go Radigan?
And then I would do Nwasu, Mafe, Hall, Taylor. Currently, at least that's the way my roster looks like.
Yeah, I'd go Radigan as well.
Okay, so what I think you can do too is I think Gibbs, you might be able to sneak into the practice squad, or if he's still struggling with his injuries, just kind of do what they did with Sutherland last year. Here's your injury settlement. Once you're healed, call us. We're going to bring you back, kind of a deal. And Drake Thomas,
they can put him on IR as well, and just not even.
That's what they could do too. And so Drake Thomas is on top as well, and that's another guy that's not really a factor in this. Now, I think Nelson Caesar makes this as the other edge because cheaper. Darrell Taylor, you have no guarantees to him, and I think you could probably, and I know this sounds crazy, because of his age and what he did show 2 years ago, there may be a team that's in more desperate need of an edge that comes calling and offers you a mid to later round pick for Darrell Taylor. And I just don't know, like looking at even the scheme that MacDonald ran at Baltimore and Michigan, he never really had a Darrell Taylor type in that was that undersized for those positions. And the other thing, like you mentioned already, Bill, Draymond Jones is taking reps at edge. And I think someone else that's going to take reps at edge, and I mentioned this on Dan Vian's live podcast, is I think Mike Morris might actually have some role in that edge because he did at Michigan for Mike MacDonald before he went into the draft. And he looks a lot thinner than he did with Pete Carroll and Clint Hurt. So I think there's a chance you see him potentially in certain sets bounce out and become an edge that gives you more flexibility there. So
here's the thing with Darrell Taylor. We already got a lot of pass rushers.
Yeah.
And Darrell Taylor is such a liability defending the run, and Mike Morris is not. Mike Morris is known for being stout and setting the edge. He can also give you a little bit of upside, giving you a push. Do we take the chance on Darrell Taylor going to another team and having 9 sacks again? Yeah, we do. Especially, he would be super motivated. Now, the argument against you is Mike MacDonald and Arde can hardly wait to get their hands on a player like Darrell Taylor and have him going forward in this defense full time instead of dropping back, going backwards, standing still. So the defense last year was kind of designed to hold ground, and a lot of players were frustrated with that, including Darrell Taylor, and it made him look like shit. And Darrell Hall, same thing. They kind of got stuck in this like no man's land a lot of the times. They got pushed around a lot because they had no forward leverage momentum, and they just weren't equipped to be adequate in that defense. It was a horrible decision, I thought, by this scheme, the regime, to put those guys in a position where they weren't being used optimally. I think Darrell Taylor makes the roster, but that's just me because he's so cheap and you could cut him week 3 if he doesn't work out or whatever. I mean, the upside for Darrell Taylor this year, though, is really high, especially if he comes in motivated.
Yeah, I think I agree with that too, because I think Bryce and I also talked earlier in the offseason where you got a few guys on this defense that, because of Mike MacDonald and the new regime, there's so many unknowns, but the talent's there. Like, another guy that we're going to get to that, obviously he's going to make the squad, but Reek Wolin, he just had a weird year last year, right? Didn't just decide not to tackle anybody and just a really not a great season. But then you're like, well, wait a second, look at this guy's upside. He's a 4.2 40. He's long, he can cover. You get him with a guy like Mike MacDonald, you start getting a little excited about it. So I agree with you on the point of the same thing with Darrell and the fact that he is cheap and you don't have any ties to him. So, if it's like it's not working out, cut him.
I think the whole crux of Darrell Taylor making the Seahawks roster depends on his preseason.
Sure.
If he struggles out of the gate and isn't impactful, especially because I got a feeling he's going to get runs against 2s and 3s, if he's not a force to be reckoned with, I could see him being hey, we're going to trade you or cut you. But I agree. I think his upside gets him on the roster to start.
Okay.
I think the other thing about Darrell Taylor, and I disagree with you just slightly, Bryce, in that I'm not sure it needs to come out in a game where he's got like 3 sacks or 2 sacks, or he finishes the preseason with 5 sacks. It's the practice. It's the dedication. It's the showing up every week, working hard, showing that he's the player that really cares, that wants to be there, that's fighting. That's what Mike MacDonald needs to see. Darrell Taylor's was known for, being lackadaisical and not really in it, not consistent, being letting injuries, little nicks and cuts keep him out of practices and so forth. So that's why I said if he's motivated and he's a different player, and we've got a new scheme that's trying to bring out the best in him, he could end up having double-digit sacks and surprise everybody.
All right, let's add him to the roster and slide over to cornerbacks here. So let's put down the couple obvious guys. Or you got Reek, you got Devin. Who else? Where are we at?
I would say Trey Brown's going to make.
I would say Trey for sure.
I think the 2 rookies will make it too.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm in agreement with that too. I think definitely the 2 rookies make it. Bill, what are your thoughts on the corners here?
Yeah, I think one of the 2 rookies makes it. I think Pritchett makes it. He's got a lot more upside. I think DJ James comes in as kind of an undersized guy. I think gets pushed around and is scheme limited in our defense. Yeah, he can play in the slot, but I wouldn't want to put him on the outside. Now, he played in the outside in college. I don't think that he can make it in the NFL. Similar like Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant played on the outside in college, did quite well. One that, was the best corner in college football. And they've just had to move him around constantly because of some physical limitations, in the NFL. And I think that DJ James kind of runs into that. And I think that's why he dropped in the draft, to be honest. And so for me, I'm looking, where's my list? Sorry. For me, I'm looking at Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, Trey Brown, Mike Jackson, Jeremiah Pritchett, and Artie Burns for just the veteran presence there.
Right.
And Artie Burns played really well last year, I will have to say.
So I got a question for you with that, Bill. Does that mean you have Kobe Bryant listed as a safety?
I have Kobe Bryant off this roster.
Wow.
Okay. Wow. See, for me, I think Kobe Bryant makes it over Artie Burns because of that versatility to play safety in this scheme. Back up Witherspoon at nickel because he has the experience of playing there. And not saying Artie Burns doesn't, but when I'm looking at kind of like what we talked about a little bit with Darrell Taylor there is Kobe Bryant. The one thing I took out of his rookie year is he's a gamer. Like he practices hard and he plays hard.
No question, all of that.
And so that's where I would say if I have to choose between a guy that's been in the league for 9 years and Kobe Bryant, who's still an up and coming and still on his rookie deal, he still has this year and next year on it. I think I would lean to keeping Kobe Bryant because I got Julian Love in that secondary. Rayshon Jenkins is assumingly going to make this team, and even Kayvon Wallace. So that's where I kind of lean with keeping Kobe Bryant over Artie Burns. And so that's what
because of the physicality. Like they want this. And Jonathan Sutherland's one of the few players that I can think of on this roster that is that.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went with that over more of a finesse player like Kobe Bryant. Now, Kobe Bryant did, punch out some footballs and so forth his rookie season. Had forced fumbles. But tell me where else he was good at all. Like showed any sort of upside at all. And he was lost out there. Now, granted, everyone looked kind of sucky last year, right? It was just awful. And he was part of that. And yeah, I would be hopeful for him. He'd be my third player that could benefit the most from a new regime.
Right.
Tariq Woolen, Daryl Taylor, and Kobe Bryant could all really maximize their talent. They've got talent. There's no question. But in the right scheme, I think those players would benefit. And I think Mike MacDonald could do it. But I like Jonathan Sutherland last year in preseason.
Yeah.
So I think Kobe Bryant, when he did play safety in the preseason last year, he did actually show that he'd get his nose in there and actually hit people, which is something I was kind of curious about myself. I agree with you. Like, as a nickel, didn't really stick his nose in. Like, he did, but he punched out footballs more than anything. When I saw him play safety before his injury that took him out for like 3/4 of last year, and then he never got really back into the rotation with Pete and their regime. When he played in the preseason, he played actually quite well at safety because he was understood where to be. He could come up and make some hits, which he did a couple of times. So I would rather keep Kobe than Artie Burns. And that way I can still, in theory, keep Sutherland in that secondary and pull him along, because I think, to your point, Bill, in a respect, I think Sutherland might even make it over, say, a Kayvon Wallace because of his speed. And, you know, even last year, he almost ended up getting starter reps in the preseason and then towards the end of the camp, and then he got hurt, which was the only thing that kind of bit him in the butt last year.
The only question mark that I have is that Jonathan Sutherland is fairly scheme specific and not as diverse as Kayvon Wallace. And I know that they want to move their safeties around all over the place. So I'm a little concerned about that with Sutherland, but I haven't seen that from him. But again, he was limited to preseason last year, and I'm not sure. But yeah, I hear you.
All right. Well, let's move over to the safeties. If you want to slide Kobe in for now, add him, and we'll move to the safeties. So you got, obviously, Julian Love just got signed. He's cemented. And then Jenkins, I think he's a guy. And then you mentioned, Kayvon Wallace, and then Jarek Reed, a guy that's coming along off his injury.
I think Jarek Reed's going to be someone that's a potential IR candidate. I think that's how they're going to get him on this roster, because listening to Mike MacDonald even talk today, he made it sound like Jarek Reed's still got a bit of a ways to go to get back.
Yeah, Bill, how do you like this safety room? Is this sort of what you had?
How many corners do we have?
We got 6 on there.
Yeah.
All right, with Kobe Bryant sort of being
I would definitely think, based on the way the team's going to use nickel, and move a guy like Jerome Baker onto the sidelines for like 70% of the snaps and have big safety, big nickel. I'm saying we'd probably end up going with 4 safeties for sure. And I'm thinking Jenkins, Love, Kayvon. I had Kayvon Wallace and Sutherland, but you could interchange Kobe Bryant. You could put Reed if he's healthy, Sutherland, or somebody that's not on the roster currently, or you can go with an extra CB that offers you some diversity.
I think we go with Sutherland because I think Jarek Reed ends up on IR to start the year for the first 4 weeks, and then we may see something change in between there and someone gets cut. But I think Sutherland.
And you put Kobe Bryant as a corner. I can't see it very well.
Yes, he's a corner down here. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we'll go Sutherland. And just so our listeners know, Jarek Reed made the IR list. So we're keeping him around. He's still going to be on the roster, but he's just not on the active roster to start game 1 of the regular season. So now we'll go to D-line.
D-line. All right. And a lot of talent on the D-line, man. So Byron, Leonard, Draymond. Where else we at? Oh, yeah. Jeremy Hankins.
Hankins makes it because he's scheme specific. Mike Morris, we talked about. We believe he makes it.
I like Mike Morris. And then you got Cameron Young.
Right. So Cameron Young's the one. And this is where it gets interesting because, like,
Cameron Young or Miles Adams.
I mean,
and I think Cameron Young makes it.
I think so too.
I think
Miles
Adams,
prototypical what the team likes to do on the inside now. You want to have your big body guy that can defend the run, and he's it. Miles Adams is undersized and only plays really 3 tech.
Right.
The one that's an interesting name to me that I hope they can sneak into the practice squad is actually Matt Godell, because he's the only true other really big D lineman like Hankins, because
He's
we know Jaron
360
Reed.
pounds.
Yeah, like Jaron Reed isn't going to be a nose tackle this year. He's going to get moved up and down and play more of a – I think Jaron Reed's actually going to have more of a pass rushing role this year. And Byron Murphy's going to take more of his snaps that he had last year to keep Jaron Reed fresh and be that kind of veteran off the, bench kind of a guy that comes in and rotates more. So I think Cameron Young is the one that we picked that goes because he is the rookie. And then I think Matt Goodell actually will make the practice squad over Miles Adams.
Okay. Yeah. Well, man, the D line was easy, man. Okay. So we got to fill out
special teams,
kicker, special teams. Okay. 3 spots,
which is pretty easy because I think it's just 3 guys.
There you go. Myers, Dixon, and your
Stoll. They didn't bring in any guys for it. So just to kind of recap it for everybody, our offense ended up looking this way. We ended up with Geno, Sam Howell at quarterback. We took 6 receivers coming out of camp, Drake Young being the 6th, Laviska Shenault, Jake Bobo, JSN, Tyler Lockett, DK. We went 4 running backs. We kept Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and Kenny McIntosh. And then we were kind of either it's George Kalani or Ricky Pearson's job there for that 4th spot. Tight end, we went Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown, and AJ Barner, which I think is pretty safe to say those 3 will make this team. Jack Westover being the kind of linchpin or kink that you could put in there, saying he may make it or not over a 6th receiver. Our offensive line was a bit more of a challenge, but we got Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, Lincoln Tomlinson, Christian Haynes, Lamea, George Fant, Bradford, Olu, Nick Harris, or Conor Williams, depending on if that signing occurs, and then McClendon Curtis. And then on defense, we had Chenna, Boy Mafe, Derek Hall, and Darrell Taylor as our edge, with Dodson Baker, Tyrese Knight, and John Radigan as the inside backers this year. Cornerback, we went Devin Witherspoon, Reek Wolin, Trey Brown, Pritchett, Mike Jack, and Kobe Bryant, who has his versatility. Safety, Julian Love, Rayshon Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace, Jonathan Sutherland, with Jarek Reed making the pup. And then D-line was Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, Draymond Jones, Jaron Reed, John Hankins, Mike Morris, and Cameron Young, with Matt Gotel making practice squad. And then our kickers are Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, and the long snapper, Chris Stoll.
Take a breath.
I know, right? Like, wow.
Yeah.
That's a really nice roster, I have to say.
It is.
Like, the more I look into it, so, we start this thing in free agency. We had a coaching change. We went into the draft. We've been talking about this stuff endlessly for months now. We get to the point now where we're really kind of seeing the roster and what this thing is going to be. And I'm getting more optimistic. Like, I started, in February going, okay, baseline 9 wins. And I'm inching towards being closer to 10 or 11, and I'm pretty confident about it. It's like Geno shows up to camp. He's in great shape. He's slinging the ball. The running game with, Gibbs and those guys and the receivers that we have, and the opening up the pass game, spreading things out. And the question mark on offense is the offensive line. I think we're going to get that figured out, and the team shows it's committed to doing that, bringing in a guy like Conor Williams. And the defense, I think, you got to let Mike MacDonald go and just see what he can do. But we've got the talent. It just needs to kind of come together. One question I wanted to ask, and you guys can cover that too. One question I did want to ask is, like, what do you think about kick returner? I know it's not that big of a deal, but they changed the rules. It's going to come into play this year. Who on the roster, and we really didn't talk about the diversity as far as the wide receiver group, and that looks like maybe that's where that's going to come from. Shenault, and then what?
I think Kenny McIntosh has a role there potentially. He did it in college. So I think his role could be that. Looking at this, like Derek Young even maybe might have a role. He is quite fast. Like, he could potentially, as a kickoff guy.
Can you imagine having Shenault and Young coming at you? carrying the. I mean, those guys are big. You know,
and they know how to carry the ball. Like the one thing with Laviska Shenault, you go back and watch his days in college. When he got the ball in his hand, he was more of a fast running back than he was a receiver with the ball in his hand. Like he's looking for contact. Derek Young's looking for contact. And I think at that point, like maybe George Filani, Kenny McIntosh, like you're putting guys back there that have the ability to explode with this new kind of setup that they've got. And I think preseason's going to tell us a lot. I think like for a guy like Derek Young, where we're talking like, is he making it over Jack Westover or a fourth running back or that? They may say, hey, go field the kick. And if he takes one and goes 60, I think that might help him solidify his spot on the roster. And like another guy that's got really good kickoff capabilities from college was Pritchett. He was one of the best kick returners in college his first year. And then because he was such a good corner, they took him off of it and just made him a corner. So he could potentially be a guy that they take a look at again, trying to see if they can find some lightning in the bottle there.
We didn't even mention Eskridge's name today at all.
No, we didn't.
How once the hoped for have fallen. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the thing is too, he's had his chances and it's been a combo of health too, but it's just, you know, you look at this talent now that we're accumulating and, you know, there's going to be some guys left off. So, I mean, like you said, Bill, I'm in agreement. I think we were in the same boat, sort of like playing it safe with the 9 wins. You know, we went back-to-back years with 9 wins, new regime. But as you start going and free agency looked pretty good and happy with the draft, you know, we felt like we hit on some nice ones there. And the way just Mike has guys and feeling like guys are buying into the message and you just start creeping up 10, 11. They want to compete. We just talked about Conor Williams, bringing him in. Clear message that we want to compete now. So I think a lot of guys are kind of hovering now double digits now and feeling pretty good about that. But
interesting.
Bill, it was awesome having you on. Sorry we couldn't get Keith on tonight, but it was awesome having you, man, talking Hawks first day of camp and then getting into this fun exercise. So before we let you go, though, why don't you let our listeners know what you got going on, where they can find your channel and all that good stuff.
Yeah, we're kind of a tandem. I work with Keith Myers. We've been at this going on it is our 8th season. We've done almost 590 shows now, and we haven't missed a week since we started, and so we feel pretty good about that. We are doing, and we're talking about the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. We're doing similar content that you guys are. We're just trying to do our best to put current stories out there, things that interest us. I think the thing that makes us somewhat different is that we're conversational, just like two guys sitting at a bar having a conversation about football. We talk about things that are interesting to us because we do the show for Keith and I, first and foremost, and everyone else just kind of comes in and joins us. And but it's two dudes sitting on the couch or sitting at the bar stools having a conversation about Seahawks football, and it's fun working with Keith because I get once in a while I win as far as the opinions. He's very opinionated, and sometimes I catch him. But other than that, he's a great guy. So I'm sorry he couldn't make it today. But thank you so much for having us on the show. We need to return the favor. We haven't done that. We haven't been very good hosts this year, hosting other shows. We're going to try to do a little bit better job this coming season.
Oh, yeah, we look forward to that. And guys, go over to their channel, check them out. They got some great stuff. So, Bill, thanks again, and I'm sure we'll talk in the future here.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Bryce.
Thanks,
See you,
Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Guys, that was Bill Alvstad from the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Man, great exercise. I love talking camp with Bill there. Just awesome having him on the show. You know, next time we'll get Keith on as well. But you know, he's just got great insight on NFL in general and obviously the Seahawks.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun not to necessarily agree on everything and actually have some conversation on different players and the way we could see this roster being constructed. But at the end of it, I was really happy with that Seahawks roster we built and the way it kind of came together. Obviously, there's guys we can't do a practice squad on it, but we mentioned guys that would definitely make through. So yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to the next show that we do with those guys and see how this kind of shapes up and see where our roster at the end of the training camp and that, how close we actually got to what Mike MacDonald and crew decide is going to be the 2024 Seahawks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun, guys. Camp rolls on day 2 tomorrow. Sub to the show. Keep it locked because we're going to be with you guys every week, following camp, talking Hawks, getting ready for the preseason, rolling the season. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's it for us tonight. We're going to catch you guys in the next one. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.